I'm going to try and say some words on the things I've used over the years when I was an amateur, when I ran Magellan, I still use today. I think they make sense. I think they make a lot of sense for investors, and I frankly think it's a tragedy in America that the small investor has been convinced by the media, the print media, the radio, the television media, that they don't have a chance. That they don't. The big institutions with all their computers and all their degrees and all their money have all the edges, and it just isn't true at all. And when they're convinced, when this happens, when this occurs, people act accordingly. When they believe it, they buy stocks for a week, and they buy options, and they buy the Chile fund this week, and next week it's the Argentina fund, and they get results proportionate to that kind of investing. And that's very bothersome. I think the public can do extremely well in the stock market on their own. I think the fact that institutions dominate the market today is a positive for small investors. These institutions push stocks on usual lows, they push them on usual highs. For someone that can sit back and have their own opinion, know something about an industry, this is a positive. It's not a negative. So that's what I want to talk about. And the single most important thing to me in the stock market for anyone is to know what you own. I'm amazed how many people own stocks. They would not be able to tell you why they own it. They couldn't say in a minute or less why they own it. Actually, if you really press them down, they'd say the reason I own this is the sucker's going up. I mean, that's the only reason. That's the only reason they own it. And if you can't explain, I'm serious, you can't explain to a 10-year-old in 2 minutes or less why you own a stock, you shouldn't own it. And that's true, I think, about 80% of people that own stocks. And this is the kind of stock people like to own. This is the kind of company people adore owning. This is a relatively simple company. They make a very narrow, easy to understand product. They make a 1 megabit SRAM, CMOS, bipolar risk, floating point, data I/O array processor with an optimizing compiler, a 16 dual port memory, a double memory, a token ring interchange backplane, and it does it in 15 nanoseconds of capability. Now, if you own a piece of crap like that, you will never make money. Never. Somebody will come along with more whetstones or less whetstones or a bigger mega flop or a smaller mega flop. You won't have the foggiest idea what's happened. And people buy this junk all the time. I made money in Dunkin' Donuts. I can understand it. When there was recessions, I didn't have to worry about what was happening. I could go there and people were still there. I didn't have to worry about low-priced Korean imports. I mean, I just didn't have, you know, I can understand it. And you laugh, I made 10 or 15 times my money in Dunkin' Donuts. Those are the kind of stocks I can understand. If you don't understand it, it doesn't work. This is the single biggest principle. And it bothers me that people are very careful with their money. The public, when they buy a refrigerator, they get a Consumer Reports. They buy a microwave oven, they do that. They ask people what's the best kind of radar range or what kind of car to buy. They do research on apartments. When they go on a trip to Wyoming, they get the Mobile Travel Guide, or California. When they go to Europe, they get the Michelin Travel Guide. People will hear a tip on a bus on some stock, and they'll put half their life savings in it before sunset, and they wonder why they lose money in the stock market. And when they lose money, they blame it on the institutions and program trading. That is garbage. They didn't do any research. They bought a piece of junk. They didn't look at the balance sheet, and that's what you get for it. And that's what we were being driven to, and it's self-fulfilling. The public does terrible investing, and they say they don't have a chance. It's because that's the way they're acting. I'm trying to convince people there is a method. There are reasons for stocks that go up. Coca-Cola, this is very magic. It's a very magic number. Easy to remember. Coca-Cola is earning 30 times per share what they did 32 years ago. The stock has gone up 30-fold. Bethlehem Steel is earning less than they did 30 years ago. The stock is half its price of 30 years ago. Stocks are not lottery tickets. There's a company behind every stock. If a company does well, the stock does well. It's not that complicated. People get too carried away. And first of all, they try and predict the stock market. That is a total waste of time. No one can predict the stock market. They try to predict interest rates. I mean, if anybody would predict interest rates right 3 times in a row, they'd be a billionaire. Considering there's not that many billionaires on the planet, it's very, you know, I had logic, so I had and no one can predict the economy. I had a lot of people in this room were around in 1981 and 82 when we had a 20% prime rate. with double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment. I don't remember anybody telling me in 1981 about it. I didn't read, I studied all this stuff. I don't remember anybody telling me we're going to have the worst recession since the Depression. So what I'm trying to tell you, it'd be very useful to know what the stock market's going to do. It'd be terrific to know that the Dow Jones average a year from now would be X, that we're going to have a full-scale recession, or interest rates are going to be 12%. That's useful stuff. You never know it, though. You just don't get to learn it. So I've always said, if you spend 14 minutes a year on economics, you've wasted 12 minutes. And I really believe that. Now, I'm talking about, economics to me is when you talk about scrap prices. When I own auto stocks, I want to know what's happening to used car prices. When used car prices are going up, it's a very good indicator. When I own hotel stocks, I want to know what hotel occupancy is about. When I own chemical stocks, I want to know what's happening to the price of ethylene. These are facts. If aluminum inventories go down 5 straight months, that's relevant. I can deal with that. Home affordability, I want to know about when I own Fannie Mae or I own a housing stock. These are facts. They're economic facts and there's economic predictions. And economic predictions are a total waste. And interest rates, Alan Greenspan's a very honest guy. He would tell you that he can't predict interest rates. He could tell you what short rates are going to do in the next 6 months. Try and stick them on what the long-term rate will be 3 years from now. He'll say, I don't have any idea. So how are you, the investor, supposed to predict interest rates if the head of the Federal Reserve can't do it? So I think that's another key element is that you have plenty of time. People are in an unbelievable rush to buy a stock. I'll give you an example of a well-known company. Walmart went public in October of 1970. 1970 went public. Already had a great record. It had 15 years performance, great balance sheet. You could have waited Walmart 10 years after they went public and made 35 times your money. If you bought it when they went public, you would have made 500 times your money. But you could have waited 10 years after Walmart went public and made over 30 times your money. You could have waited 3 years after Microsoft went public and made 10 times your money. Now, if you knew something about software, I know nothing about software. If you knew something about software, you would have said, these guys have it. I don't care who's going to win, Compaq, IBM. I know who's going to win Japanese computers. I know Microsoft, MS-DOS is the right thing. You could have bought Microsoft. Again, I'm repeating myself, stocks are not a lottery ticket. There's a company behind every stock. And you can just watch it. You have plenty of time. People are in an amazing rush to purchase a security. They're out of breath when they call up. You don't need to do this. It's throw it away. One of the things I find a rule, a couple of rules I want to throw out that I find useful, excuse me, is a lot of times people buy on the basis the stock has gone down this much. How much further can it go down? I remember when Polaroid went from 130 to 100, people said, here's this great company, great record. If it ever gets below 100, just buy every share, and it did get below 100. A lot of people bought on that basis saying, look, it's gone from 135 to 100. It's now 95, what a buy. Within a year, it was 18. And this is a company with no debt. I mean, this is a company, it was just so overpriced, it went down. I did the same thing in my, I think my first or second year at Fidelity. Kaiser Industries had gone from $26 a share to 16. I said, how much lower can it go? It's 16. So I think we bought one of the biggest blocks ever on the American Stock Exchange of Kaiser Industries at 14. I said, it's gone from 26 to 16. How much lower can it go? Well, at 10, I called my mother but if you didn't understand the company, if you're just buying on the fact the stock had gone from 26 to 16 and then it got to 10, what would you do when it went to 9? What would you do when it went to 8? What would you do when it went to 7? This is the problem that people have, is they sell stocks because they didn't know why they bought it, then it went down, and they don't know what to do now. Do you flip a coin? Do you walk around the block? What do you do? It's psychiatry. The important thing is you can't get too attached to a stock. You have to understand there's a company behind it. You can't treat this like your grandchildren. You have to deal with the stock and say, I understand the company, and if it deteriorates, if the fundamentals slip, you have to say goodbye to it. If one rule you want to remember is the stock does not know you own it. This is a breakthrough. So don't get, you have to understand it and say they're doing well, and as long as they keep doing well, my best stocks have been my 5th, 6th, 7th year I own them, not my 5th, 6th, 7th day. So you have to understand that and stay with it. And then I want to conclude with there's always something to worry about. If you own stocks, there's always something to worry about. You can't get away from it. What happens in the 50s, people were worried about the only reason we got out of the Depression was World War II. We got another recession In the early 50s, they said we're going to go right back into a depression. People were worried about a depression in the 50s, and they worried about nuclear war. I mean, back then, the little warheads they had then, they couldn't blow up McLean, West Virginia, or McLean, Virginia, or Charlestown. Now, all these countries that end in STAN, there's 9 of these STAN countries that have come out of Russia. They all have enough warheads to blow the world up, and no one worries about it. When I was a kid, people were building fallout shelters, and we used to have this civil defense drill. Remember this one in high school? You get under your desk. I never thought even then that was a particularly good thing to do. They'd blow whistles. Some people in a hat would all get under our desk. But in the 50s, people wouldn't buy stocks, except for the 80s. The 50s was the best decade, the century of the stock market. And people wouldn't buy stocks in the 50s because they're worried about nuclear war and they're worried about depression. Then people, remember when oil went from 4 to 40 and it was going to go to 100 and we're going to have a depression? Remember that one? Well, about 3 years later, the same experts, now higher paid, oil's now at 10, and they said it was going to go to 4 and we're going to have a depression. And then the Japanese, remember how the Japanese were going to own the world? Remember that one? And that we're going to have a depression? And then about 2 years later, we're all worried about Japan collapsing. And this is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. There's a company with a 20% savings rate, incredible workforce, incredible productivity, and people are saying we're going to have a depression because Japan's going to collapse. And they had, on their prayer list, they lowered Mother Teresa and crippled children, and they were praying for Japan at night. It's unbelievable. I mean, the LDC debt. Remember the LDC debt? Remember that one? All these countries, all Chase had lent their net worth to Brazil, Chile, Peru, and all these other countries, and so and all the other countries. And LD said they were not going to pay it back, and we're going to have a depression. It always ends and we're going to have a depression. Or the Great Depression. We're going to have the Great Depression. I never could quite understand that adjective in front of depression, but the Great Depression, or the big one. The big one's coming. But all these, so there's always something to worry about, and the key organ in your body.
Are you concerned about the volatility in the financial markets today? Do you think something needs to be done to reduce it?
I love volatility. I remember when in 1972 the market went from down dramatically, and Taco Bell went from 14 to 1. They had no debt. They never had a restaurant close, and I started buying at 7, but I kept on to it, and it went to 1. And it was the largest position in Magellan in 1978 when it was bought out by $42 by Pepsi-Cola. And I think it would have gone to 400 if they didn't buy it out. I think volatility is terrific. I think these callers are very important. I don't think the market going up 80 points one day and down 80 the next is a good thing for the public. I think that's not a very good thing. But I think all of these callers and all these other things, to keep the volatility down each day is important. But the market's going to go up and down. Human nature hasn't changed a lot in 25,000 years. And some event will come out of left field, and the market will go down or the market will go up. So volatility will occur, and markets will continue to have these ups and downs. I think that's a great opportunity if people can understand what they own. If they don't understand what they own, they can own mutual funds, try to figure out what mutual funds they own, and keep adding to it. Basically, corporate profits have grown about 8% a year historically. So corporate profits double about every 9 years. The stock market ought to double about every 9 years. So I think the next market's about 3,800 today, 3,700. I'm pretty convinced the next 3,800 points will be up. It won't be down. The next 500 points, the next 600 points, I don't know which way they're going. So the market ought to double in the next 8 or 9 years. It ought to double again in the 8 or 9 years after that. Because profits will go up 8% a year, and stocks will fall. That's all there is to it.
We're in the month of October. Beware of the month of October, the witching month for the stock market. What do you see as the outlook for this month, and when do you think the Dow will hit 4,000?
Okay.